Restorative behavioral management is therapy-based and a holistic approach to classroom management. Many of the techniques and strategies are derived from research completed by John and Julie Schwartz Gottman for maintaining, repairing, and nurturing family relationships. The goals of restorative behavioral management, or RBM for short, are provide a safe and stable learning environment for teachers and students, and nurture, maintain, and repair healthy classroom dynamics by hacking the human experience. When it comes to classroom management decisions, educators must ask themselves, are my behavioral management choices helping my students develop healthy self-regulation or negative coping mechanisms? Are my behavioral management choices providing me with short-term solutions or long-term stability? Many behaviors we identify with disrespect are physiological and psychological markers for children retreating into their natural survival instincts. We can assume that many of their choices are a mixture of learned behaviors, childhood trauma, and genetic predispositions to fight, flight, or freeze. We can often make the mistake that students responding with the survival method of freezing are actually complying with our directions as a teacher. Our behavior and choices are typically determined by our past experiences and stimuli we encounter in the world. When we experience stress, our brains will attempt to protect us by playing out familiar behavior patterns that kept us safe previously. This is often why children and adults make irrational choices when there was a better, far more rational choice. When you engage in a confrontation for control with students, you are really acting as a proxy for the primary authority figure in the student's life. I'm going to show you a couple different photos, and I want you to take a moment and just kind of think about how they make you feel. Alright, here are the first two. Okay, now let's take a look at these photos. What do you notice? Finally, take a look at these photos. It's important to recognize and reflect on how children can perceive us as a threat to their well-being when we're upset. It triggers the same survival instincts we would have if we encountered a wild predatory animal. Rational thinking isn't something we're really good at as a species when our number one priority becomes the safety of our physical person. Children will make choices based on what they think will keep them safe. Sometimes it's complying, shutting down, or active defiance. And to be completely transparent with you, the best thing that RBM has done for me was lowering my blood pressure and stress levels. This approach will help you stay calm and more self-aware of your own feelings. When I started using and perfecting RBM, I stopped coming home emotionally exhausted from school. I had more energy for my family, and I started using these techniques to build healthier relationships with colleagues and family members. RBM is a behavior-focused approach. Measurable behavior is malleable behavior. We aren't able to scientifically measure the intent of an action, but we can certainly measure the impact of an action. So what are measurable behaviors? Let's use the virtue of being honest as an example. We can't measure if someone is honest, but we can measure their actions and the impact they have on people thinking they are honest. I've made some examples of what measurable behaviors look like when we're actually trying to pull data from them. What I find interesting about teaching, and especially working with young children and even young adults, is we try to espouse these principles of like being respectful and being honest or being patient without actually teaching them the aspects that go into those concepts, the actual measurable events that can make a person respectful, make them honest, make them patient, or even make them deceitful or rude. This isn't a comprehensive list, but I wanted to engage with you when I'm talking about making classroom expectations measurable, that this is what it should look like. So what often happens is teachers discipline and manage their classrooms through what I call the student-focused approach. And they end up saying things like, I need you to stop talking, it's disrespectful, or you need to keep your hands to yourself, or why are you acting like this? That approach emphasizes the student and not the behavior, which now we're having a totally different argument with the student because they're going to become defensive. They want to survive the new situation that they're currently in with you as the teacher. They're going to try and save face. And what we want is to disengage from that defensive cycle and redirect the unwanted behavior. RBM implements I feel statements when redirecting behaviors. You have 1, I feel. 2, identify the cause of that feeling. 3, what you need to redirect and change. Then you're going to check for understanding, and then you ask for their assistance, committing to the change. For step 1, I'm feeling, a great example of something we can tell our students, and something I know a lot of teachers feel many times, is the feeling of being frustrated. Now, if you notice, this isn't a measurable behavior. We're going to get to that point with the describing the action that's causing us to feel frustrated. And this is very important that we're stating it as an I'm feeling, because this doesn't put it at the feet of the kids. This is just letting them know what actions are causing us to be frustrated. It's letting them know how we're feeling through words, and they're not having to try and read our body language. When you start with an I'm feeling statement, it's going to stop the natural inclination of children going into defensive behavior. We're not making it about them, we're making it about us. And anytime an issue is about somebody or you're declaring as them, they're going to want to defend themselves. And the moment you start defending yourself, it's the moment that you stop listening. So the second step is to identify the root cause of the problem and why we're feeling frustrated. And we have to identify it for our students so they understand why we're actually frustrated and don't attach it to something else. As we look at Miss Kristopher here, she's trying to get through instruction and teach some division and multiplication, but everyone's on their phones. That is identifying the issue. Using RBM, Miss Kristopher would say, I'm feeling frustrated because I'm giving instructions in class and students are on their phones during instructional time. The next step is to state what you need in order to rectify the situation. And this has to be measurable. We can't say, I need everyone to stop being disrespectful. We have to use measurable behaviors. If we want them to be respectful of our time, we say, I need everyone to put their phones away so I can continue with instruction. That's a measurable behavior, everyone putting their phones away. You can collect data on who's actually following that request. Step number 4, checking for understanding, is vital. This is something you can't skip over or gloss over because you feel like you don't have time in class. When you check to make sure the kids are understanding what you're asking for and letting them tell you in their own words, you can see if there's any miscommunication happening or breaks in perception. This is a chance for them to really process and understand what needs to happen, and you can gauge where they are in their own headspace. The final step is to ask students for assistance. Now that sounds odd, but we have to remember that authority in a classroom is just one big giant illusion. And this is where we can gain significant buy-in with the students when they feel like they're part of the solution rather than being, a direct order or commanded to do something. So after you've gotten the kids to understand how you're feeling and what's frustrating you or making you upset, or what's happening in the classroom, we ask them to commit to the solution. Will you commit to putting your phones away so I can continue instruction? Will you commit to following instructions during the game so that everyone can stay safe? Will you commit to taking turns and wait patiently for your turn? So here is, beginning to end, the example of all 5 steps of the dialogue and that a teacher should use when they are trying to redirect behavior using RBM. I'm not going to read it back over to you, but this is a great place where you can pause it and just kind of review each step. This process and dialogue template helps our students develop empathy. When we're teaching our students a new skill, we know that they have to have time to practice and apply that new skill, and that they don't really understand it if they just get it through a presentation or just through a lecture style of learning. They actually have to practice that skill. And often enough, many of the behavioral strategies that we use with kids or presentations and lessons they go through in counseling are all kind of theory-based, where they get to learn of them in the abstract and not actually apply those skills. With RBM, they're actively watching a teacher apply those skills and show their developed emotional strategies and skills. And that's the important aspect here. You are teaching healthy emotional reactions and ability to communicate your needs in front of the students so that they can learn to do that as well, which completely changes the atmosphere of your classroom. It's vital that our students see that as adults, we can hold difficult and challenging emotions without exploding or having negative outbursts and reactions. We want our students to know that you can be upset and not yell or lash out at other people. We want our students to know they can be angry or hurt and express that and be seen without a negative action or negative behaviors to get that attention. I could spend the whole day with you discussing in great detail how to implement RBM into your classroom, but we only have 45 minutes, so I want to move on to some strategies you can use to de-escalate situations before they become behavioral confrontations. One of my favorite strategies is the start over method, and I'd like to show you an example of it being implemented in a confrontation between Michael and Daryl from Practice Difficult Conversations. There are many times I have related to Daryl's facial expression when a student comes up to me or interrupts class with nonsense. This technique is a reminder to students to think about how they approach a situation without escalating one issue into a bigger confrontation. Remember, our students can't develop communication skills if they don't have the time to practice them on us. Sadly, many students don't have the home life that provides a safe place to learn these skills. Skills only get better when the risk of failure doesn't induce overwhelming negative consequences. We don't expect children to be independent sight singers without practice and guidance. Why should healthy communication be any different? Another strategy is called the empathy hack. Responding to a child's backtalk with empathy is probably the most effective tactic you can use. It is called a counter move. You don't respond to anger with anger. Kids feel less threatened, and it is a great way to diffuse potential power struggles. First, you describe measurable behaviors you're seeing, and then infer how they are feeling with a question. Example, I noticed that you stomped your feet and started speaking with a very loud voice. Are you feeling upset? This opens up a dialogue. Rather than telling the child or accusing them of how they are feeling, we are asking them, giving them an opportunity to express the difficult emotion safely. It takes the guesswork out of trying to figure out what is going on in the immediate situation, and the student is less likely to become defensive. You're now on the same team. Another strategy I like to use is called the student check-in. So when students are feeling high emotions or intense emotions, it can be hard to get them to process or even discuss how they're feeling in the moment. So if we're able to give them a break and have them sit down and complete a worksheet or a resource paper that helps them kind of figure out on their own how they're feeling and what they think happened to make them feel this way, is a great way to essentially let feelings and stress cool down and allow that rational part of the brain to start kicking in for students and for teachers. This allows you to keep your class continuing forward and then allows the child to have a moment to really process how they're feeling. This is a technique and resource that I've refined, and this is one of my final versions. It's been really helpful in my classroom. What's important is after you have the student fill it out is that you then, check back in with them, go over it and make sure you understand how they're feeling, and then you address what your needs are as a teacher in order for class to continue. This is a really great resource when you need to redirect very quickly and allow the kid to process while also managing the rest of the class. I want you to consider that on average, a grade level teacher will work with a student for 175 days over the course of 1 year, while a music teacher will work with the same student for 245 days over the course of 6 to 7 years. Many of us have our own experiences in witnessing toxic relationships between a specific teacher and student. At some point, there's an inciting incident because of conflicting personalities that can poison the whole year and even the student's attitudes towards school and learning. At this point, a teacher's prerogative is just to make it to the end of the school year, because then that student won't be their problem anymore. We don't have that option as music teachers, and many of us can attest to struggling with combative relationships with students across multiple grade levels that just seem to get worse as they enter puberty. The next segment is how to heal and repair relationships with students that need us the most. This exercise is for processing past fights, regrettable incidents, or past emotional injuries. It needs to be a conversation, as if you were both sitting in the balcony of a theater looking down on the stage where the action had occurred. This requires calm and some emotional distance from the incident. To do this effectively, you have to avoid the 4 horsemen of disrupting positive communication, which are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. We can resolve these issues by using a gentle startup, taking responsibility, describing our own feelings, and do our own physiological self-soothing. Here are the 5 steps when you start this process. First, feelings. Invite your student to share how they feel, but not say why they feel that way. And avoid commenting on your student's feelings. This is basically going, I feel sad. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling lots of anger. Right now, we just want the students to identify those innate feelings that they have inside of them. We can get to the why and the reasoning behind them and all the measurable behaviors that lead to it. But first, this is just their time to feel validated. The next step is to describe your reality. And this is where you're going to take turns with your student. You share how you perceive things have been going to bring you to the situation where you are in now. And you're going to ask your student to summarize your perception. Then you're going to do the same thing for the student. You don't have to agree with your student's perception, and they can completely see it a different way than you did. The whole point is that they need to be heard, and you might catch something you've been missing. This is a great way to start building that bridge of communication and moving forward so that you know that they're taking you seriously and vice versa. Step 3 is to share your triggers. Invite your student to share what experiences or memories that they've had that might have escalated the interaction. And you can ask them to describe and elaborate these stories as to why they might be triggers that led the situations that you're currently in with them. And you're also going to explain your own triggers and it's essentially sharing like your annoyances and things you've dealt with that led up to this point. When we talk about feeling disrespected and what can really grind a teacher's gears, this is your way of empathizing with a student and letting them know where your landmines are and where theirs are. This is letting us see each other and humanizing the whole experience. Once we've gotten past discussing each other's triggers, we're going to start talking about responsibility. We're not going to lay blame at any one person's feet. We're both going to take turns acknowledging how we both brought this situation to where we are now. No matter who's reacting to who, we both failed at this moment by letting things escalate. Teaching our students that we can apologize and accept responsibility is something that I think is missing from society right now, because one of the biggest issues I see is that anytime someone admits any type of guilt, we ring them to the wall, and students need to know that we're all human, we're flawed, and we acknowledge that we're flawed and that we're always trying to do better. The final step is constructive planning, which is where both you and the student go over at least one thing you can do differently to avoid any further incidences. Ask your student what they can do differently, and share one thing you're going to do differently and how you'll support each other. You're building a team between you and the student to handle issues together rather than making the other person feel like the issue. How often do we complain about a student being the problem when that student will go home with the perception that we as the teacher are the problem? I'd like to push back on a thought sequence some of y'all might be having. I don't have time to do this, and I'm not the counselor or therapist. You have the choice to set aside time for restorative behavioral management or continue to expend emotional labor and stress by repeating the same cyclical behavioral management patterns you're already using. I agree that teachers are overburdened with responsibilities that our society has either abdicated from intentionally or through sheer neglect and decades of apathy in regards to the needs of our students. Your emotional, mental, and physical health matters as a teacher, and you need a behavioral management system that prioritizes you and the ability to teach healthy boundaries. We can't expect teachers to develop healthy students with healthy, productive, and critical thinking minds if we're I had a lot of fun making this presentation, especially using all of my skills with Bitmoji and my graphic design and video editing skills. I just wanted to share how grateful I am that you decided to come join me for my session. I wanted to finish off with talking about some other suggestions and things that you can start doing, now as a young teacher or a veteran teacher that will help you on your way to establishing a healthy learning environment with restorative behavioral management in the classroom. One technique that I've been using effectively for me is that I started just recording myself teaching and doing discipline management like I would be if I was preparing videos for when I was student teaching. Through the stress and, tenuous time we have as a teacher, you can end up a lot of the time piecing together through memory your frustration day. And our memories are, formed around our emotions and feelings, stressors that happen to us. And oftentimes for us as teachers, our stressors are the kids we're teaching. And videotaping yourself is a great way to see what triggered yourself in a lot of those situations and what got your goat, and that you can alleviate those triggers on your own and learn how to self-regulate in a more healthy way, so that you don't feel stressed coming home, that you're not triggering yourself and escalating conversations. It allows me to reference back my inflection, and I can take the mantle off of what I'm hearing and how I remember a conversation going, and listening back to it as a third party. And that's been really helpful for me. I want to urge that this is not a behavioral management strategy that you can just implement in one day. It is something you have to be ready to make mistakes in and implement one day at a time. I'd like to recommend some books to you. This one is called Restorative Practices in the Classroom, and I'll put a little doobly-doo in the video description. It's called Better Than Carrots or Sticks, and it's by Dominique Smith, Douglas Fisher, and Nancy Frey. It was really helpful in getting this presentation together, and it did wonders for me in my classroom. And let me grab one more. This one is really good. It's by Brad Weinstein and Nathan Maynard. It's 9 ways to create a culture of empathy and responsibility using restorative justice. Feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions. You can get me at Kristopher Brown at kodalyviking.com. That's my email. Capital K and a capital B in my name. You can see it in the video up there. And I wish you the best of the rest of your TMEA, and I hope that next year I can enjoy another TMEA with you in person. So I look forward to your questions after the video recording, and enjoy the rest of your day.
sing no songs and tap the beat. Breathe in from your head to your feet. Sing blue so we can try to tune. Then we'll learn a new song. Point to the shape of melodies. Clap words, walk beat independently. Let's dance and move creatively. Read, write, and improvise. So you teach Kodaly, clap and sing with solfege, tuning fork on headband, write in ostinato. You're that folk type, pedagogy sound type, sing it in a round type, might arrange some or type. I teach Kodaly. Ta! I teach Kodaly. Label and present, so and me write hard, cross buns in key of G, compose and use form ABC. Listen for ta, D, me. Think of a rhyme and stay in time. Bounce the ball high and low, shallow. I'll sing the first phrase by myself. You sing phrase 2 and 3. I teach Kodaly.